Personal stories often remain hidden until someone asks about the moments that truly mattered, revealing buried experiences. Hidden memories are significant because ordinary recollections often carry fears, desires, and changes that listeners recognize immediately. Storytelling becomes crucial when experiences are transformed into narratives that others can follow, rather than left as private feelings. The power lies in deciding that a moment was not random, but part of how a life was understood. This decision raises stakes because silence can keep confusion intact, while a spoken story can clarify what changed and why. Here, storytelling is treated as a human practice, older than performance, deeply connected to everyday survival, identity, and community. It is also emphasized that no one can escape storytelling, as people have been doing it since they first started talking. Once this idea settles in, the task no longer feels reserved for rare talent, but becomes a matter of disciplined attention. The following sections will explore structure, delivery, listening, and the wider effect stories can create. How to Tell a Story by Meg Bowles and Catherine Burns makes memory usable. Subscribe to the channel for more practical storytelling ideas. Truth matters here because listeners respond differently when they feel a story comes from lived experience rather than invention. Honesty creates trust, allowing a private event to open into something shared without losing its personal texture. The emphasis on true stories also explains why history, family memory, awkward failure, and intimate change can all belong together. What connects them is not fame, but authenticity, as ordinary events can become gripping when the teller believes every word. Listening then becomes active rather than passive, as audience attention follows the movement of feeling, detail, and recognition. The book even describes research on brains aligning when a listener is engaged and comprehending the story being told. That idea fits the repeated claim that good storytelling does more than entertain. It organizes attention and feeling together. Silence in a room can therefore signal connection rather than rejection when listeners are suspended inside someone else's experience. By the end, strangers may understand one another better because truth narrows distance faster than explanation alone usually can. When a story feels honest and specific, private memory stops being isolated and starts becoming shared human ground. Anecdotes may get laughs at a table, but a story truly begins when listeners understand what could be won or lost. That is why stakes matter so much, because without them, events can feel decorative, scattered, or emotionally weightless. External stakes show what happens in the world, while internal stakes reveal why those outcomes matter to the teller. The most effective material, therefore, reaches beneath action and shows fear, longing, shame, hope, or need becoming harder to avoid. Pressure sharpens a story because desire meets obstacle, and the audience can sense why a choice will leave consequences. This framework also separates an anecdote from a story, since sequence alone cannot hold attention without a deeper reason to care. A big event can remain flat if motivation stays blurry, while a modest event can land hard when meaning is clear. That is why directors keep searching for the point beneath the point, especially when a teller wanders around it. The work is not about adding drama from outside, but about uncovering the real pressure already living inside the memory. Once stakes are visible, the audience knows what to watch, and the story can move with purpose. After stakes are found, the material still needs to be shaped so that remembered events stop feeling cluttered and start forming a progression. One helpful move is to reduce the entire story to a single sentence that names what the journey is really about. That sentence does not replace scenes, but it keeps them from pulling the teller toward colourful but irrelevant digressions. From there, narrative stepping stones help select the moments that must appear so that each beat earns the next one. Scenes matter because listeners need to know where the action is happening and what changes from moment to moment. Details matter too, but only those that sharpen understanding, mood, or stakes rather than showing off memory alone. Backstory earns its place when it helps the present moment make sense instead of delaying what the audience came for. Then the structure rises toward the main event, the point where all that tension finally has somewhere to land. The result is not random remembrance, but a shaped path that lets listeners feel escalation, arrival, and changed understanding. Good shape preserves room for detail without rambling, and it turns lived disorder into something another mind can follow. Emotion lands best when handled honestly, as exaggeration and performance tricks weaken trust faster than they deepen feeling. Humor works for the same reason, since it grows from recognition, timing, surprise, and a willingness to expose vulnerability. The introduction makes this visible by treating failure and awkwardness as valuable material rather than pretending only heroic stories matter. That shift opens space for listeners who know embarrassment, uncertainty, self-criticism, and unfinished recovery from real experience. It also requires care, as other people in a story cannot be used as props for someone else's self-display. Emotional force depends on empathy, context, and attention to what a telling asks an audience to hold. When the material involves grief or pain, readiness matters, as a story should communicate feeling rather than collapse under it. Handled well, emotion does not announce a moral, but lets listeners sense what became clearer after confusion or hurt. This makes storytelling less about polish and more about brave accuracy, restraint, and respect for the lived moment. If honest emotion and useful structure matter to you, subscribe to the channel, as these ideas reward repeated practice and careful listening. Structure matters because listeners cannot experience a story all at once and need guidance through time, emphasis, and return. Chronological order is often the clearest path, especially when cause and effect need room to gather weight gradually. Flashbacks can work too, but only when they deepen the current tension instead of breaking attention for mere decoration. Callbacks and framing devices help because an opening image or phrase can gather larger meaning once the ending arrives. Sometimes a smaller story carries the weight of a larger one by revealing a broader struggle through a single concrete event. A unique lens also matters, since the same public event can feel entirely different depending on who is speaking. Beginnings therefore need to enter decisively, while endings need to land on change rather than explaining what the audience should think. The strongest endings stay true to life, keeping the insight inside the experience instead of stapling on a sermon. This is exactly why directors keep asking what happened next, what the scene means now, and where the real ending lives. When structure is doing its job, listeners feel a sense of arrival without being pushed and carry the ending with them afterward. Once a story has taken shape, it must still survive the transition from page or thought into a living voice. That is why this advice emphasizes familiarization over strict memorization for most of the telling. Memorizing every word can trap the delivery inside recall, making attention focus on accuracy rather than connection. Familiarization keeps the order, scenes, and phrasing alive while allowing for breadth, responsiveness, and natural emphasis. The text suggests that first and last lines may be worth knowing especially well, because entry and exit carry extra pressure. Saying the story out loud then becomes essential, as spoken rehearsal quickly exposes clutter, imbalance, and awkward transitions. It also reveals where a sentence runs long, where detail confuses, and where momentum suddenly disappears. Delivery improves when the teller hears the rhythm of the piece instead of relying solely on silent reading. This practice does not flatten spontaneity, as the goal is confidence in the path rather than robotic repetition. When the story lives in the body as well as the mind, speaking it becomes steadier and clearer. Nerves remain a part of telling because stepping forward with personal material naturally exposes uncertainty, judgment, and emotional risk. The first minute is often the hardest, not because the story is failing, but because the body is catching up. Grounding helps by slowing the rush to begin, allowing posture, breath, and attention to settle before the first line. Visible nerves are not a disaster here, as they can reveal care and even soften the bond with listeners. Preparation also means knowing where emotion may rise, so surprise does not seize the story in mid-telling. If a difficult subject brings tears or pause, the guidance is to breathe, stop, and feel rather than force control. Audience awareness matters too, as technical, cultural, or experiential context may need to be added for clarity. But clarity should not become pandering, as the story must not be shaped around what you imagine people want. Honouring lived experience keeps the telling rooted, even when fear, memory, and performance pressure arrive together. With that stance, nerves become part of the crossing, rather than a sign that the story should stay untold. The final movement widens the frame, showing that storytelling matters beyond stages, workshops, and rehearsed personal reflection. In schools, work, families, and public life, stories make information memorable because people attach meaning to lived moments. That is why the book recommends opening data-heavy communication with a story before moving into findings and evidence. A work example shows a board understanding risk through personal accounts and responding with far greater urgency and generosity. Family stories matter differently because they carry lineage, gratitude, sorrow, and love that ordinary routines often leave unspoken. They can honor sacrifice, connect generations, and make people feel seen in ways that direct statements sometimes cannot reach. The ripple extends further when honest testimony enters rooms where listeners have not lived the same experience themselves. Then, discomfort can become a catalyst for reflection and change, provided the storyteller chooses the right space and context. Listening completes this process because stories do not only travel outward, but also reshape those who receive them carefully. Through that exchange, stories become more than mere expression. They act as memory, bridge, and social force. Taken together, these ideas treat storytelling as disciplined truth-telling rather than ornament, self-promotion, or decorative performance. Begin by noticing which memory carries pressure, movement, and meaning that another person could actually follow. From there, focus on stakes, a one-sentence focus, scenes, details, and structure to transform experience into a path rather than a pile. Speaking aloud, preparing for nerves, and respecting audience context help that path survive the transition into live telling. Listening then gives the story its full life because connection depends on someone receiving the shaped experience with attention. Broader examples show why this matters, since schools, workplaces, families, and public conversations all change when stories land well. No extraordinary biography is required because the invitation here keeps returning to the fact that everyone already has story material. What matters is doing the work to develop it honestly and then having the courage to share it. A practical starting point is simple. Choose one memory, name the pressure inside it, and speak it aloud until its shape holds. If you want more careful summaries of communication frameworks, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for ideas that help stories connect.